You're listening to the Future Tech Health Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Until I reached age 40, I never realized the obvious, that we all have medical issues, or we at least have a family member or close relation that had, has, or will have them in the future. Medicine and biological systems are the final frontier. Until we've conquered death, figured out how life began, cured cancer, and understood our purpose in the universe, there's a heck of a lot to talk about when it comes to our health. Future Tech Health means I'll be covering futuristic topics that are actually already in clinical trials, or even starting to appear on shelves or by prescription, or available for your own use. We dive deep into stem cells, CRISPR-Cas9, the science of sleep, epigenetics, medical testing, cancer, ketogenic diets, stem cells, aging, regenerative medicine, and more. My goal for you, the listener, is to learn from these podcasts. You may very well learn something that may change the course of your life for the better, steer you towards a new career, or give you insight into addressing a serious medical problem. Remember, however, this podcast and its content is informational in nature only. No medical, tax, legal, financial, or psychological advice is being given. If you enjoyed the podcast, please listen, subscribe, like, and share it with friends. Thank you. Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Future Tech and Future Tech Health podcast, and I have Dr. Stuart Kwan. He's a clinical chief and medical director, Division of Sleep and Circadian Disorders, Brigham Women's Hospital. So, Stuart or Dr. Kwan, how are you doing today?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good. I'm wide awake. My chronotype has allowed me to be awake to talk to you, so I'm glad to be here, just to make a bad joke.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so tell me about your work in the realm of sleep. What attracted you to it in the first place, and then what specifically are you working on?
Well, I was attracted to doing work on sleep because sleep affects everybody. We sleep for 1/3 of our lives. It's the one activity we do the most of, and it actually is the one thing that we do that if we don't do it good or well or long enough, it can have significant repercussions on our health and also others, and also our quality of life.
So what area of sleep are you focusing on? What fascinates you about it?
Well, we do a lot of work right now on trying to promote good sleep health. So one of our initiatives currently is to interact with various institutions and organizations to give presentations on good sleep health. And then at the same time, then at the end of the presentation, we administer a screening questionnaire to people to see if actually they have a problem with their sleep. And if they do, to help them get in touch with a healthcare provider so that they can have it further evaluated. We call this program the Sleep Matters Initiative.
Okay.
And
so what are some of the most common problems people have with sleep?
Well, the most common problem is actually sleep deficiency. You know that 30% of Americans will report that they sleep less than 6 hours per night, which when you consider that, it in comparison to what's currently recommended, which is at least 7 hours per night, that's a large number of people who aren't getting enough sleep. In addition, almost 70% of Americans will say that they don't get enough sleep at night. So that's a lot of people that are affected by sleep deficiency. Yeah. We consider an epidemic, really. If you think about it, there are upwards of 350 million people in the United States. And if 70% of them say they're not getting enough sleep, that's a lot of people who are affected.
Yeah. And the difference between 6 hours and 7 hours or 8 hours, medically, physiologically, do you see there's a huge difference just in the loss of an hour or two of sleep?
Oh, well, yes. I mean, the studies show that people who get less than 6 hours of sleep are at risk for greater amounts of heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, stroke. So this can have a significant impact on people's lives. Not to mention the fact that it's a problem with their quality of life and also to the health and safety of others. For example, if you go for 24 hours straight without sleeping, like you stay up for 24 straight hours, your impairment in performance is the same as a blood alcohol level of 0.1%. Now, what is
wow.
0.1% is legally drunk. So essentially, you don't, no one should get out and under a week go out and drive a car with that blood alcohol level greater than 0.1%. And if they do, and if they are pulled over by the police, they get arrested for drunk driving. However, I mean, most people won't think twice about getting behind a wheel if they've been up for a long period of time and they're sleepy to go drive. Somehow people haven't.
Yeah. What if if you were a surgeon or a healthcare professional or a bus driver or even just driving your family around, you could get into an accident and kill them, or you're a surgeon, you could hurt somebody, or a healthcare provider, you could misdiagnose.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, many of the public safety accidents that you've read about in the past few years, many of them have been related to the operator of the truck or the bus or the train not getting enough sleep or having a sleep disorder that caused them to be sleepy. So all of those were preventable accidents, and some of them resulted in people being killed. So it's an important.
You said like 70% of Americans report themselves as not getting enough sleep, not getting sufficient sleep.
Yeah.
So I guess the only way they would know that is to, since they're not coming from labs being diagnosed as such, is that they feel, probably tired, foggy, not well, not rested, a whole host of I feel this or that in order for them to report that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when you think about it, so if you have to get up to go to work in the morning and you need an alarm clock to wake up, that means that you basically are sleep deprived for that night. I mean, you may be able to function, but you're not going to be quite at the level you would have been if you had slept an adequate amount of time, because the brain is able to compensate some, but there is a period of time when it starts to catch up with you.
So when you do these assessments and people tell you, "Oh, I'm not sleeping enough," what kind of misconceptions or urban myths do you have to battle in order to get them to agree to be treated or to seek help or do a sleep study or talk to a sleep professional?
Well, I think that the greatest myth is that you can fight your way past this whole thing. That if you feel tired and sleepy, it's just a matter. I drink a couple of cups of coffee and I'm fine. That I'll be okay today. I'll make it through to the weekend, then I can sleep and catch up. So what most people don't realize that kind of catches their attention is that not getting enough sleep can impact their health. Almost everybody realizes if they don't sleep enough, they don't feel good. I mean, you feel tired, sleepy, all those things you just mentioned. So they realize that can be a problem with not getting enough sleep because everybody is, stayed up all night and they don't feel so great the next day. So they can translate that. What they don't realize is that not getting enough sleep can shorten their life. When
you say shorten health span or lifespan or both?
Yeah.
How much?
Shorten their lifespan. It's difficult.
Are there any estimates on the amount of shortening?
Well, that's kind of hard to know. It kind of varies according to the study that you read. In fact, I mean, it's most of the time the studies aren't framed that way. They look at what usually happens is you survey a group of individuals and you figure out and you assess how much sleep they're getting, and then you look at what percentage of people are alive who are slept 6 hours, 5 hours, 7 hours, and that sort of thing. So it's the studies really haven't been done where you followed people for basically a lifespan to figure out how many what the life shortening is.
And when people report that they're not sleeping well, do they tell you it's a certain number of nights per week, or is it just every night they're having a problem? I mean, how do you characterize the lack of sleep?
Well, you ask them basically kind of on a regular basis how much sleep they're getting. In some studies, people actually wear like an actigraphic type of device where it kind of is like a wristwatch, and it measures motion, and from measuring motion, you can infer when a person's awake and asleep. So you can get a more accurate measurement of perhaps how much a person sleeps. Like a lot of the Fitbits and Jawbones and those things that are out there, they have accelerometers that act as these devices to determine when a person's awake and asleep. So it's the same sort of principle.
How good are those devices compared to doing a sleep study? I mean, I know you can't do a sleep study every night of your life, but how good are they?
So in determining when a person's awake and asleep, just whether you're awake and asleep, not necessarily trying to assess what the quality of your sleep is, they're relatively accurate. But a lot of the devices purport to say, oh, you got so much deep sleep, you got so much light sleep, that sort of thing. Most of those devices, they're not really well validated against a real sleep study. So if a person has one, I would say if it tells you only got 7 hours of sleep last night, it's relatively accurate in that. But if it says you got X% deep sleep, X% light sleep, I wouldn't put necessarily much stock in those numbers.
And when the people come to you for help, what are some of the first things you'll go over with them and evaluate and then tell them or suggest to do?
Well, I try to find out exactly what their sleep pattern is, and then I look at the factors that may be, inhibiting them getting good quality sleep. Most people actually don't come to the sleep clinic because they say, I don't sleep, I'm only sleeping 6 hours per night. Most of the people come to the sleep clinic because actually they feel that they're too sleepy.
They don't come, or they do come because they're too sleepy?
They come because they're too sleepy, but they don't.
They have, I guess, what you'd call like excessive daytime sleepiness. Is that what it is?
Yeah, that's 90% of people come to sleep clinic because they have some variation of being excessively sleepy during the day. Now, some of that is related to the fact that they don't sleep enough at night. So in those individuals, the solution is pretty simple. They need to revise their lifestyle a little bit so that they try to get enough time in bed so they can sleep enough. Okay. Other people, other of these folks, they may actually have a real sleep disorder like sleep apnea or narcolepsy, something like that. Now, those people actually need a sleep study.
Well, when you first interact with people, do they resist you? Do they say, I'm just tired, or I'm fine, or they say, help me, I need help, and they're willing to listen to what you have to say?
So there's a difference between a person coming into sleep clinic and a person we're making a general presentation to the audience. In sleep clinic, these people have made an appointment because they think there's something wrong with them. So it's actually pretty easy to say, hey, you need to do something about your life, or we need to do additional testing, or that sort of thing. When you're giving a presentation to a general audience, most of these people come because they're interested in learning more about sleep. And for the most part, people go away with saying, hey, you've given me new information. I didn't realize that how sleep was important in their life. They're actually quite interested in usually the information that's presented. Now, whether they do anything with the information, that's difficult to say.
Do you feel, or do you get from people the sense that the advice you give, or how people interpret the advice is like, oh, this is obvious, or this is common sense? How could you not know that sleep's important? Or is it not like that at all?
I don't think it's that at all. I think that people, when you present them the information, they say, yes, now I know why sleep's important, that they don't discount it. What has happened, I think, in society is that people have discounted the importance of sleep kind of as a societal thing, because employers reward productivity. So if you, for example, are working in a company and the boss comes by and says, I need a report by tomorrow type of thing, and it's 5:00 that day, and if you wanted to advance in the company, it'd be a general response would be, right away, I'll work tonight on it. Person might work till 3 a.m. on the thing and turn it in, right? Not realizing that they were sleep deprived, that they're making themselves sleep deprived, rather than saying, it'd be better, I could get a better report out to you if I got a little sleep and worked on it the next day.
What do you think? Why do you think people sleep less than 6 hours a night, or 6 hours a night or less? Is it because their chronotype butts up against having to get up early for work, or is there another reason? Like, life is just so busy that they don't go to bed when they should, and they stay up too late.
Well, it's the latter, really. Now, that's not to say that there aren't some people who basically are night owl type people who stay up late naturally because their chronotype is such, and then when they have a difficulty getting up in the morning. But for most people, I mean, society has become a 24-hour day, right? It,
Mm.
I work in a hospital. Hospitals are a 24-hour business, so to speak. The
Yeah.
supermarket down the street is open 24 hours. So are a lot of drugstores. The airlines. I mean, they fly all night. So it turns out that over 20% of people are shift workers. So they're working these odd shifts.
Mm.
And if you look around, if you go out at midnight in any big city, you're from Chicago, right? This is from Chicago. I'm talking to you from Chicago.
Right. Yeah.
You go down the Magnificent Mile at 2 a.m. in the morning. There's a lot of lights on because there's stuff happening, and that results in people doing things at night, and they basically are compressing the day. I mean,
So what's a typical interaction? Let's say I come to see you. I say, Doc, I'm tired every day. I drink coffee or energy drinks in the morning. I'm just tired. And you say, hey, how much are you sleeping? I say, about 5-6 hours a night. Is that a typical conversation? And if so, what would you say from there? What's a typical conversation look like, the back and forth of it?
So I would say it would appear that the reason why you're tired and stuff during the daytime is you're not getting enough sleep. And I would say then that it appears that some of you have some bad sleep habits and you need to set aside a greater amount of time in order to get an adequate amount of sleep. The person would say, well, how much is an adequate amount? I would say, well, we recommend at least 7 hours, but individual needs vary. And the person might say, well, how can I determine that? And I would say, what you need to do is go on a 2-week vacation, go someplace where you're not constrained by your job or the need to do anything, so that you go to bed when your body says it's time to go to sleep and you feel sleepy, and then you wake up without the aid of your cell phone, alarm clock, or whatever, and you do that for a few days, and then you've actually found out how much your natural sleep needs are. I would also say that tell the person that there are a number of bad sleep habits depending on what they are doing, such as if they're drinking, for example, at night, if they're drinking coffee close to bedtime, they're using their cell phones or tablet close to bedtime. There are some what we call sleep stealers that need to be eliminated as well.
So do you have a worksheet where you ask them like a prescribed set of questions to determine what they're doing to, ruin their night's sleep?
Well, there are some people who probably use a worksheet, but basically mine's in my head.
Oh, okay. I don't know if you had like a checklist of ever-growing reasons why, people mess their sleep up. But okay. What about folks that say, well, you know what, I sleep in on the weekends. I sleep like 10 hours each day in the weekend. How come I'm still sleepy during the week? How about that?
Well, a lot of people actually do that. So if a person sleeps longer on weekends than they do during the weekday, they obviously are telling me that they're not getting enough sleep on weekdays. And so the typical story would be, they're only sleeping about 6 hours on weekdays. They use an alarm clock to wake up, and then on weekends they'll sleep until 10 or something like that.
Yeah.
It turns out that we're learning more that regularity in your sleep patterns are almost as important to your health as sleep duration. And so, while you may live like that, it may not necessarily be the best thing overall.
Well, what if I say to you, Doc, I'm busy. I got a wife and kids, and I got work, and I don't think I can get 7 or 8 hours a night. I could squeeze in 5 or 6. What do I do then?
Well, life is a set of choices, and quite frankly, unfortunately, in our society, there are people that need to work 2 jobs because their life is such that one job they can't make enough money to support themselves or their family or whatever. And I'm totally sympathetic to that. And there is no solution to that other than changing society somehow for those people. And that's an unfortunate situation. Just like there's hunger in our world. There's people who through no fault of their own are not doing well. But for many people, they've made choices. And if they examine their life, perhaps that they can decide whether they wish to sleep, as long as they know the consequences. That's their choice. I mean, there's a lot of people for example, on the East and West Coast, for example, some people like to watch The Late Show with Colbert, for example, and so that comes on at about 11:30 on the West Coast, and the East Coast. For Chicago and the Midwest and the Mountain Time zones, it's 10:30. It's 1 hour earlier. I've done research to show that people on the East Coast and the West Coast, they actually sleep less than people in the Midwest and the Mountain Time zones. And I think it's just because of the TV schedules. So if you choose to watch the Late Show or any other TV show late at night, you've made a conscious choice that you didn't have to do that. You could have chose to go to sleep. And today, for many people, they actually don't even need to make that choice because they can set their VCR or their DVR to record the show, and they can watch it some other time.
Right. Yeah.
So they don't even need to make that choice. But you make choices for certain activities. And
what about the time you do have? I mean, do you suggest taking a nap during the day if the person can do that? Does that help? What about when they're sleeping? Do you ask them about disruptions during sleep, and maybe if they can get a solid 6 instead of a broken 6, that'll get them over the hump?
Well, there's no question that fragmented sleep, for whatever reason, if you live next to a train station or something like that, or an airport, you're not going to sleep as well as the person who lives out in the country without any sound or extraneous sound around. So fragmented sleep versus solid sleep is, no matter what the duration is always, you want solid sleep over fragmented sleep. All I can say is that you should try to get as much sleep as you can.
All right. So what's a typical interaction again with patients? Like, how are you able to help them? Are you able to convince them of the importance of getting more sleep, and so they do, and they're happy from there? Or what are typical outcomes?
Well, yeah. I mean, a typical outcome, if they believe what you're saying, they will try to alter their lifestyle so they get more sleep, and then they will be happier. Having said that, most patients come to sleep clinic because they're excessively sleepy, and they usually have a sleep disorder. So that's an entirely different kettle of fish, where we actually do tests and stuff like that, a sleep study to actually evaluate why their sleep there's something wrong with their sleep. And for those individuals, it depends on what their problem is, and they may get various treatments. You asked about naps.
How long? Naps.
Yeah. So naps, we use generally if you have the need to nap, that generally means that you haven't got good sleep the night before or for a long time before that. And there's nothing wrong with taking naps, but you have to realize that if you're one of those people who has trouble sleeping at night because you have insomnia, taking a nap during the daytime is not going to help your sleep at night. But we tell people who are shift workers, for example, because they're sleeping against their clock when they're trying to be awake when they should be asleep, that taking a nap before they report to work is sometimes a useful tool. Or being able, if their employer permits them, to take a nap during their shift can be useful as well to maintain alertness.
Okay. So you see naps as a viable way. If someone says, I just literally can't sleep more than 6 hours a night because of circumstances, but I can take a nap, once a day.
Would that be okay?
That could work. Okay. And then for naps, any wisdom around them? How long? What kind of circumstances? What can you do to make sure the nap, works versus is not a waste?
Well, it kind of depends on whether they're taking a nap and they need to be immediately alert after they wake up. So if they're they're in employed situation where they're allowed to take a brief nap, but then they have to wake up and actually work, especially if they're in a situation where they have to be alert because their job requires alertness, like they're driving a tractor or something, so they're a public safety issue. Then you don't want to take a real long nap, not more than 15 or 20 minutes, because you'll drop off into deep sleep and it's harder to wake up from that. And you might have this thing called sleep inertia, a greater amount of that, which is basically a situation where you don't really wake up immediately. When a person goes to sleep, they don't go from 0 to 100 miles an hour immediately. It takes a little revving up of the engine. And if you drop off into a deep sleep, that it's harder to get that going. So you can get some refreshing sleep with a short amount of time, but if you take a longer amount of sleep, yes, you'll get refreshed, but it'll be harder to kind of get going immediately thereafter.
Yeah, I've woken up from naps where I'm like in a stupor, and it's like impossible to wake up for sometimes even an hour. So I tend not to nap because I'm like, oh,
That's sleep inertia. Exactly.
I felt it, yeah.
So if you were in a public safety type of job, and you wouldn't want to be driving a bus, for example, right after your nap.
Right, yeah. Well, a big question I have about naps is, like you said, you don't want to sleep for more than 15 or 20 minutes, but, the times I've laid down to take a nap, I think, how long do I set the alarm for? What if it takes me 30 minutes to fall asleep? Should I just give up? What if it takes me 15 minutes? How do I know how long to set the nap for?
Well, again, it depends on your circumstance. There's nothing wrong with taking a longer nap if you don't have to be immediately alert thereafter. And if it takes you 30 minutes or an hour to you lay down to take a nap, and it takes you 30 minutes or 60 minutes to fall asleep, why did you need to take a nap initially anyway?
I don't know. Sleep's very psychological. There's been times where I lay there and I couldn't sleep, and I had to tell myself, look, you've fallen asleep for 40 plus years. Why would you not fall asleep now? Because you want to sleep, but you can't sleep, but you want to sleep, but you can't sleep. So sometimes it's like a psych. You psych yourself out.
Well, there is a psychological component to that. You're right. But we tell people basically in general that you shouldn't spend time laying in bed trying to sleep. So if you can't fall asleep right away, you should probably not be trying to sleep in your bed, because that just promotes a self-defeating behavior on the part of people. When we treat people with insomnia, a lot of times they'll say, well, I went to bed at 9 p.m. And I'll say, well, why were you sleepy then? They said, no. Then I say, why did you get into bed? And he said, well, because it was 9 o'clock. I'm supposed to get into bed at 9 o'clock. Well, that's all nice, but if they're having insomnia and they're not able to fall asleep at 9 o'clock, and they just lay in bed for 2 hours waiting for themselves to fall asleep, what good has that done? They're just laying in bed awake. They should be out of bed. They could at least be doing something else until they're sleepy. They're now just laying in bed ruminating about the fact that they can't fall asleep, and that only makes the situation worse.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard people with insomnia will try to solve it by going to bed earlier and earlier and earlier, but they just end up laying in bed for 9-10 hours and still not sleeping.
Yeah, and one of the strategies we use actually to treat people with insomnia is that we actually restrict the time they are actually able to be in bed. Kind of, you sneak up on, you restrict the time in bed to only the time they are actually able to sleep. And once they can do that on a regular basis, then you allow them to stay a little bit longer in bed. You see how that might work.
Okay, interesting. Any trends you see over the years? Are things changing, or they, sleep's the same as it always was?
I think the biggest trend in sleep these days is, we talked about it a little earlier, is the self-monitoring technology, the so-called wearable market. That people, there's just every time you look around, there's a new app or a new device that purports to measure all these various health parameters, that their pulse, their blood pressure, their this or that, and sleep being one of them. And that some of them are kind of snake oil, and some of them actually probably have some reasonable validity into what they're measuring. And the same goes for sleep devices. So there is greater number of these things so people will be able to better monitor their sleep, and with knowledge about how well they're sleeping, they will then perhaps be better motivated to perhaps doing something about it. And these devices then, a lot of them now, they'll be able to look at the sleep pattern, and they have developed then strategies to say, well, you only slept 6 hours tonight. This is what you should do. I mean, they'll kind of give some advice after person's established the pattern to perhaps help the person sleep more. And so I see that sort of stuff coming down the pike as so that there's more self-monitoring and more the ability to treat yourself for some of these things.
So I don't want to ask you which devices you don't like, but any of them you do like. Any devices you think that are really helpful for people?
I don't have a favorite. I don't have really an opinion on these.
Okay. All right. Are people confused as to, let's say they're tired, they're not sleeping well? Will they tend to ask their general practitioner for help first? Or will they think, oh, I need a sleep doctor? Or will they not even know there is such a thing?
I think that most people would go and ask their primary care doctor or primary care clinician about this. The hope is that the doctors are becoming more educated as well to some extent, and that they will ask appropriate questions to screen out the people that they need to refer to a sleep doctor versus those that they can try and help within their own practice. So there's various types of things that you can do to identify people who have sleep apnea or narcolepsy or that sort of thing that need to be seen by a sleep specialist. And then there's other things that most of the other patients perhaps can be, treated by just giving some better advice on the patient, to the patient. The main problem is that most physicians now are pressed for time, that they have very little time. Perhaps you've experienced it yourself to actually spend with the patient.
I've been told by doctors I don't have time. Yeah.
There you go.
I've experienced it.
I mean, it's unfortunate. I won't. That's an entirely different subject that you perhaps can ask others about. But as a physician, I've experienced myself. But sleep disorders is one of these issues that sometimes you actually have to talk to the person for a while to get an idea of what they're doing with their life, and that takes time. And time is a commodity sometimes that the primary care doctors don't have, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay. Well, speaking of which, I think we're at the same situation. We're at the end of time. So what's the best way for listeners to get resources? Unfortunately, not everyone in the world can see you. If they are local to you, where is that? And, how do they contact you? And if they just want more resources to learn about sleep and the effects and how to sleep better, where can they go then?
Well, I'm at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, Massachusetts. We have a website. It's brighamandwomens.org. And if they go to that website, they can find, our clinic and how to get in touch with us to make an appointment. We also have a website, a sleep education website at www.understandingsleep.org, and it has information on sleep apnea and healthy sleep. It's produced both by us physicians at Brigham and Women's and the Harvard Medical School, which Brigham and Women's is a major Harvard teaching hospital.
Well, very good. Well, Dr. Kwan, I appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast.
Oh, you're quite welcome.
You're listening to the Future Tech Health Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Until I reached age 40, I never realized the obvious, that we all have medical issues, or we at least have a family member or close relation that has, or will have them in the future. Medicine and biological systems are the final frontier. Until we've conquered death, figured out how life began, cured cancer, and understood our purpose in the universe, there's a heck of a lot to talk about when it comes to our health. Future Tech Health means I'll be covering futuristic topics that are actually already in clinical trials, or even starting to appear on shelves or by prescription, or available for your own use. We dive deep into stem cells, CRISPR-Cas9, the science of sleep, epigenetics, medical testing, cancer, ketogenic diets, stem cells, aging, regenerative medicine, and more. My goal for you, the listener, is to learn from these podcasts. You may very well learn something that may change the course of your life for the better, steer you towards a new career, or give you insight into addressing a serious medical problem. Remember, however, this podcast and its content is informational in nature only. No medical, tax, legal, financial, or psychological advice is being given. If you enjoyed the podcast, please listen, subscribe, like, and share it with friends. Thank you.